Hi, welcome to my UX scorecard on code suggestions. My name is Taylor and I'm a designer at GitLab. And let's see if we can get through this in under 10 minutes. So, the purpose of a UX heuristic evaluation is to apply best practices and patterns, and it's not actual user research. So, the scenario that this is focusing on is a software developer who's new to the GitLab workflow extension, and they're trying to use the new code suggestion feature to complete some common tasks. VS Code was chosen just because of its popularity. Quick highlights: benchmark score of C, which is average. Some of the top highlights: code suggestions are definitely useful once you learn the workflow. However, there are some areas of improvement around things like system status, learning some of the more difficult AI features such as code generation, and sometimes it can feel a bit noisy and distracting. First task was the initial onboarding after installing the extension. Exploring the UI is something new users will do, and the first thing that popped out was the AI icon in the activity bar. It's very eye-catching, and that was the first place I think a lot of users will look for AI features. When you open it, though, it's just Duo Chat specific. This is a little bit confusing because we use the same icon in the status bar, but that status does not refer to Duo Chat or other features. It's just code suggestions. And by clicking it, you can enable and disable code suggestions. That was also a little bit confusing because I opened it on an unsupported language. I was wondering why code suggestions weren't showing up. And so I started toggling it or clicking it, expecting it to take me to settings or give some more information about what the problem was. And what happens is you're able to toggle code suggestions, but it's the icon remains the same because you're on an unsupported language. You can only really tell if you stop and hover and read the hover information there. That was a little bit confusing. So some ways to apply heuristics to improve the initial onboarding task. So one heuristic is around giving users control and freedom. And I think this is really relevant to the developer persona because they feel very strongly about their workflow and their tools. And they don't all fit the early adopter persona because AI is still new to the industry. So one way we could respect their autonomy is to keep code suggestions disabled by default and ask for their permission to enable. The other benefit of this is when they do enable, we can also provide some onboarding guidance, such as summaries, links to documentation, things like that. Another idea is just communicating the value and helping them understand AI in the GitLab workflow extensions. So we could adopt wayfinding principles, which one way to do that is what's your home base, what's anchoring you. So perhaps that becomes we link to settings off of the status bar, or perhaps we give a little bit more information in the GitLab workflow activity bar view, or there's multiple ways to do this. The other way would be leveraging Duo Chat. That's a quick and easy way to just sort of provide some initial guidance for the starter questions that are customized for IDE workflows rather than just our generic how do I change my password in GitLab. The task is writing code with code suggestions. Code completion is a very intuitive pattern because we see it in a lot of text-based apps that we use. It's immediately recognizable as AI and that you can see the value that it provides. However, it can feel a bit overpowering sometimes because the suggestions aren't always helpful. For example, creating white space or pressing enter just starts creating code, and the gutter icon sort of appears and disappears. And as a new user, it can sometimes feel a bit random, but it ultimately results in a lot of flashing UI elements and code shifting around. Code generation was a lot more difficult for a new user. I had to watch some demo videos before I could understand how it worked. I was confusing code generation with code completion because writing comments is, for example, a standard part of a developer workflow, and it wasn't obvious that the comments were now acting as prompts. So it was easy to mistake with code completion. Another thing is just a little bit easy to misunderstand the status. For example, I had an error where it was failing silently, essentially. The gutter icon would disappear, but no code would appear after trying to generate some code. Another one would be the stepper for viewing alternate code blocks. It's not obvious for a keyboard-heavy user, and it's easy to miss because it's off to the side, and you have to first hover the suggested code and then navigate over to the stepper to work through. But little bit easy to miss. So now for some ideas on improving code suggestions. One idea is that's important is around consistency and standards. We don't want users wondering what the meaning of certain elements or patterns actually mean. For example, we could use on the right hand side here a slash command with color to make it very clear that this is a prompt and not just you writing a code comment. We could also group the recommended code gen into its own sort of area, so then users will be less likely to miss the step, or they can see that they have a next suggestion available. They can see keyboard bindings. Another idea is making the system status a little easier to understand for first-time users. For example, the gutter icon right now is quite small and it appears in and out of the UI, which can be a bit confusing. So one way we could do this is to maybe even remove the loading icon. Do we really need it for example, if code completion's in progress, you can see that it's being auto-completed. But perhaps if code completion's available but you haven't accepted yet, it appears. For example, in this example on the right-hand side here, you can see that this is sourced from GitLab. We could also use color to differentiate between code gen and code completion. And maybe we even add additional functionality that could be communicated by filling in the icon. For example, your prompt is ready. You can manually trigger it then, or perhaps we even allow shortcuts to be accessible right from the gutter icon. Another thing that would be really nice is if we cleared the prompt after a code block has been accepted, because when it stays in the UI, it has to be manually deleted, and that could be missed, which adds extra work. Another thing would be just making the system status a little bit more obvious. So when we have an error, rather than just disabling the icon, we could actually use something where we are changing the color to red, and clicking on that could even either trigger a notification that gives some more explanation how to resolve that problem. All right, so for the final task, we'll focus on shortcuts. So the context menu has the shortcuts to use code within DuoChat. So this is really useful and intuitive if you can find it. I think keyboard heavy users are going to have a hard time discovering this, but it does make repeatable use cases much easier. It is a little bit awkward though to use the explain command with things like, say, how do I fix this type error, or help me find this syntax error, just because you have to sit and wait for an explanation first. So one idea for shortcuts is maybe we can make them a little more discoverable through an actionable gutter icon, similar to code actions, or maybe we even can integrate it into the code actions menu. So some just general heuristics ideas. So flexibility and efficiency of use is really important. Perhaps when using some of these shortcuts, we allow the feature to compare the code, just because users are likely going to want to see what has been changed or what they're introducing into their code base. The other thing is maybe adding a troubleshoot shortcut could be useful, just because they highlight some code, help me fix this syntax or type error. That could be a way to speed up that workflow. And finally, just more of a general comment, but the status menu, or the status icon in the status bar at the bottom, currently it just allows users to toggle code suggestions, and that seems like an area that could be potentially better utilized. So we've reached the end of this UX scorecard. Overall, there's definitely some really big positives. It's easy to set up. The usefulness definitely increases once you get past that initial learning curve. And both DuoChat and code completion especially are really intuitive. There's still some opportunities around making the UI a little bit less distracting, and maybe improving that code gen learning curve and adding some actionable error notifications, but overall things are looking great. For more information, you can see the UX scorecard and also the recommendations broken up with links to Figma concepts that you can get a little bit more detail on these issues. Thank you for watching.